those of you that are not familiar with JourneyTEAM, we've been a Microsoft partner for almost 30 years now. We've got almost 150 team members with over 350 active clients right now. This last year, we were just introduced to the Microsoft's Inner Circle, which is given to the top 1% of Microsoft partners. We've also been Partner of the Year a couple of years in a row as well. So I know today we're going to be looking at the wonderful world of Windows, but as you know, with JourneyTEAM, we do work across the entire Microsoft stack. So if there is a session that you may have missed or you weren't able to attend, or you do have questions around anything as you look to grow and mature within the Microsoft stack, please feel free to make that note in the survey comments or reach out to us directly, because these are the other areas that we can help out with. So anyways, we appreciate you guys attending, and for now, I'm going to turn the time over to our presenters, Tim and Jared.
Cool. The light is green, so I suppose you could hear us all. So good to be with you. Again, we would love to have you guys put your questions, comments, concerns, anything you think you'd want to learn about Windows 365 into the chat right now, and then we'll monitor that and try to capture that as we go through the presentation. That way we're not playing catch up at the end or run out of time for questions as we go through things. So first we're going to jump on in and talk about some differences between Azure Virtual Desktops and Windows 365. So primarily, let's look at this as a comparison. They are both desktop as a service solutions for Microsoft. Under the hood, Windows 365 is built on top of the existing Microsoft Azure infrastructure. So if you're wondering, well, what's the difference? Technically, under the hood, they're the same beast and animal. It's just how they're built and how they're managed is the biggest difference between Azure Virtual Desktops and Windows 365. The control plane, both are used the same control plane, so they all have web portals, gateways, connection brokers, licensing's involved on both ends. And again, as far as the components goes, they are hosted and managed by Microsoft. And for admins, you interact via the portal or an API, or end users interact with the applications through clients or applications. And we'll show you the different applications here in a little bit. As far as subscriptions goes in the Azure world, it's basically a bucket of money where you pay for subscriptions or the services that you use. So in Azure Virtual Desktops world, you have an Azure subscription, and that's used to purchase all the different pieces and parts and components of the Azure Virtual Desktop world. In the Windows 365 world, this is a software managed Azure subscription, so you don't get to you don't have to purchase a subscription or spool one up to run Windows 365. Everything is license based. So you purchase a license, which would then provision the things in the background, like a VNet and other things to bring that system online and manageable. Now, the enterprise level of things we'll talk about a little bit later. You can have a subscription with networking in that subscription to leverage that piece and component of the Windows 365 for enterprise. When it comes to compute, very similar. You get a lot more options in Azure Virtual Desktop. So not only can you do a dedicated single user VM, but you can do pooled VMs where multiple users can log into that VM. And then your cost is incurred as those VMs run or spooled on and processing. Whereas the Windows 365 world, again, dedicated license per user, and it's on all the time, it's on demand, so that is never a concern that you have to turn it on or manage to turn it on. It's a fixed price per month. No real Azure subscription is necessary, though again, we'll get into pieces where you can do that. The storage for the difference between the storage, Azure Virtual Desktop, again, because you're building your own environment, you have lots and lots of options, premium SSD versus standard. You could leverage auto scaling on that side of things. You're going to leverage FX logic profiles, typically stored in Azure file shares or NetApps or things like that. And then backups are determined by you. So storage-wise, it's really determination on you on how you want to manage that. In the Windows 365 world, it's a predefined amount of SSD based off the license you purchased. You can't pick the storage type. They'll all be SSD storage. There's no auto scaling. There's no FX logic used. The user profiles actually natively reside fully on the C drive in these Windows 365 machines. So again, the way it's managed is a little bit different, but not terrible. Networking wise is where we start to cross the streams a little bit. Azure Virtual Desktops, it's fully configured by IT admins and how you want to do that. Whether you have a site-to-site VPN or site to multi-site or just a VNet built up into Azure, that is totally up to how you want to build it. And again, the IT department is fully responsible for any costs associated with egress and bandwidth usage and how you build that out. Now on the Windows 365 side, you have a couple of options. Enterprise cloud PCs have the same options as Azure Virtual Desktop. You actually can build out your VNet however you want, and you can actually connect that to an on-prem environment to leverage resources in that environment and make those devices leverage like printers or scanners or other things in that environment. That network interface is actually injected into your subscription with the PCs residing in the Microsoft subscription. So it's kind of a hybrid where your NIC, your VNet is actually in your Azure subscription, but everything residing in the environment on the Microsoft basis sits in the Microsoft subscription. Now, if you do business cloud PCs, the network is part of a Microsoft managed network. Routing, firewall, VPN, any of that stuff is all managed by Microsoft, and it's built out in that environment. And then just recently, Microsoft released the option where enterprise cloud PCs can now leverage that same Microsoft managed network. So whereas before, when it was first released, enterprise cloud PCs had to talk to an on-prem AD and go down that route, it doesn't anymore, and we could leverage the cloud infrastructure and keep your VNet and communication up in the cloud. As far as user profiles go, Azure, this is very different between the two. Our Azure Virtual Desktop leverages FS Logic Profile Container Technology. This allows the users to roam their profile between multiple VMs. And as they sign, if it's a pooled set of VMs, it doesn't matter that they go to the same machine every time, right? It's just whatever pooled machine they land on. And if it's a shared machine or a single user machine, it's just first come, first serve. And then that container technology allows that user profile to basically connect at time of connection to whatever VM you're connecting into. On the Windows 365 side, again, FS Logic is removed from the picture. This is a true one-to-one relationship. That user profile is contained natively on the C drive. You're not changing that. As you decommission or repurpose licenses, it actually spools down the VM and then rebuilds the VM with the new user profile on it. Though some data is contained for a certain period of time after that. But user profiles, again, single session desktops dedicated to individual users. As far as identities go, where do you get the identity to log into these machines? Azure Virtual Desktop currently requires Active Directory domain services to work. You could leverage that on an existing Windows Active Directory environment, or you could use Azure Active Directory domain services, build a server, put your Azure Active Directory on that server, and deal with it that way. Native Azure AD join is not an option yet. It was announced, but it's not generally available yet. So that is coming. I think that's a result of the enterprise side on Windows 365 where that is available. So for cloud PCs in the enterprise level, you have a couple of options. You can hybrid Azure AD join these VMs to an Azure Active Directory domain, or you can natively leverage Azure AD and do Azure AD join devices for these enterprise cloud PCs. The business cloud PCs, they're just natively joined to Azure AD. There is no connection to an on-prem Active Directory or anything like that. IT management, how your group would manage these different machines. Again, very, very different models. Azure Virtual Desktop relies heavily upon your IT to manage all aspects of the environment. Because it's so flexible on how you build that out. Again, everybody, all the components and things that you build out, you get to maintain. It all resides in Azure, but again, you get to make sure it all works and that it's reliable and everything goes from A to Z. The Windows 365 world aims to simplify that management. It's like making these VMs in the cloud like existing physical PCs. You may manage your VNet, but again, that's not required, as the PCs are generally, all the services, firewalls, other things are managed by the Microsoft world. And then to actually service the machine like a physical PC, it leveraged the enterprise cloud PCs are managed through Endpoint Manager. So an Intune license is required if you're going to use enterprise Windows 365 machines. On the business side, there's limited management capabilities. It's very simple, but you can't push apps and other things to it like you natively can do with the enterprise side of things. The management portals, how you actually get in and manage these different services. Again, Azure Virtual Desktop, you're going to use your Azure portal, portal.azure.com. You can also manage that through various PowerShell commandlets and whatnot, give them the right credentials. And then these machines could be joined to an MDM like Microsoft Endpoint Manager. So some management of those VMs could take place within the cloud or through Microsoft Endpoint Manager to provide some of that overhead as well. Windows 365 machines leverage Microsoft Endpoint Manager. Whether that's enterprise or business, that's an option within business to turn that on and push apps. That's newer. The landscape's always changing. And then if you manage your own VNet, you'd leverage the Azure portal and or PowerShell to go in and build that VNet and manage that networking piece of it. Operating systems, Azure Virtual Desktops has lots of different OSs that you can leverage, from servers 2016 to 2022, enterprise virtual desktop, multi-session machines, Windows 10/11 single sessions, supports lots of different operating systems. The Windows 365 world, you basically get to pick Windows 10 or Windows 11 single session operating system for those computers or VMs. As far as desktop images, AVD again, because it's your landscape and you play with that however you want. You can make as many different custom images that you want to, or golden images, if you will, that you want to push down to these virtual desktops. You can leverage the Azure Marketplace images. There's some shared image galleries, or you can build your own and push those down onto the machines to kind of give it a kickstart and what that machine looks like when the users first log into it. On the Windows 365 world, they're Windows 10 and 11 single session. You do have the option on the enterprise level to build a limited number of custom images that you push down to those machines. But again, you're going to be limited to Windows 10 and 11 and however the other applications that you want to load up onto that image, if you will, to bring onto that machine. Business cloud PCs, the Windows 365 business only supports Windows 10 or 11 machines. You do get the option to inject it with the Office apps or not, but that's kind of your base starting point. And again, it's made for really, really simple computers in the business cloud PC world. Disaster recovery and backup. Azure Virtual Desktop is going to leverage Azure Site Recovery and Azure Backup or third-party tools to create disaster recovery, image, backup, save points, whatever. Windows 365, there's no native method, Microsoft managed method like Azure Site Recovery or Backup, other than what Microsoft is doing in the background. You don't have any control or method to manage that. However, in the enterprise PCs now, and the business, actually saw that earlier today, you're able to create restore points that are saved inside the cloud that you can load up those restore points and move the machine back to the previous restore point. Kind of like you take a snapshot in Hyper-V or some other service, and you could roll that machine back to that snapshot, if you will. As far as monitoring the services, you're going to get a whole lot of visibility, and you can build all sorts of log analytics and visualize that with Azure Monitor workbooks. So you can create all sorts of fun custom reports and whatnot to monitor your environment, capacity usage, uptime, downtime, networking. You're getting a lot of logs because you built that environment out within Azure Virtual Desktop. So it's kind of an open book as far as how you want to monitor and build that out in your environment. Enterprise Cloud PCs monitoring, that uses Microsoft Endpoint Analytics inside of Microsoft Endpoint Manager. And we'll show you that a little bit later on at what things you can see or not see in that environment. As far as end users go, it's almost identical between the two systems. There's client apps available for Windows, Mac, iOS, Android. There's also an HTML5 client that you can log into. We'll show you those experiences in a little bit. Users authenticate using Azure AD into that environment. Depending on which client app you log into, you can log into that environment with facial recognition and PIN in the Windows 365 world. Or you may just need to be required to re-enter your password to get into that environment. Again, it's all dependent on the doorway that you used to go in and access those resources. Some of the end user applications that you use, you will see all the entitled PCs, cloud PCs that you are able to use. They all populate and show up, and you'll see multiple environments per se, as opposed to just the one machine or two machines. So if you're licensed for 50 machines, you get to see all 50 at one time. Printing and scanning, both AAVD and Windows 365 support printer and scanner redirection via the remote desktop client application. Sometimes that could get a little bit tricky, and you have to do some workarounds to make that happy. But it is doable and does work pretty well. If you're leveraging a VNet that's connected to an on-prem infrastructure, technically you could load up printer-based scanning and network-based printing and scanning through your site-to-site VPN tunnel, and you could print from those cloud PCs down to your on-prem network and infrastructure. Additionally, Microsoft does offer a cloud-based print solution in Universal Print, and that's a pretty slick environment to provide printing across multiple, without the need of a network to get to those printers. You could leverage both a Universal Print enabled printer, so you go out and buy one that directly talks to Universal Print, or if you can't or you don't want to afford that or pay for those printers, you could install a client that resides in that environment that can see the printer through the network, and that talks through a connector up to the cloud, so that when print jobs come through, it basically acts as a print spooler and passes those jobs onto those printers, and things spit out and you can see them print and whatnot. That kind of runs through the differences between AVD and Windows 365. Do we have any questions pop in or not yet?
Nothing came in so far.
Okay, so we'll turn over to Jared and we'll talk about some pros and cons.
All right. Hope we're having a good time out there. First thing I do want to talk about are the different pros that you get with Windows 365. The Windows 365 machines are always on. So the nice advantage with that is you can push updates whenever you want to that machine. You can leverage update rings through Endpoint Manager and force a reboot in the middle of the night. You're not waiting for that machine to come online for that user to approve the reboot. It just will do it whenever you want it to go. The other pro is hardware costs. You might need to have a user that only needs a computer for a couple of months. You don't need to go out and buy that hardware. It's all subscription based, and you can spin up those machines as frequently and as infrequently as you need to. The machines are using a 3 gigabit internet connection at Microsoft's data center. So you know you're going to always have a good connection for that machine to access any of those internal resources as well as just getting on the internet. And one of my favorite features with Windows 365 is the versatility of devices that can connect to that machine. For example, I can use an iPad, a tablet, a Chromebook, or even just a web browser capable of HTML5. And then the other nice thing is there is a lot less need for IT to have to be doing so much management with a Windows 365 machine. Now, some of the cons of a Windows 365 machine is this is a subscription model. This is not a one-time purchase. Many companies I know are very CapEx focused when they want to have equipment, but this would be an OpEx expense. So a monthly recurring charge would happen per machine. And as I just said, this is a per user license. So you need to purchase a license for every machine that you need to spin up. And as Tim had mentioned earlier, setting up a printer can be a little bit tricky. So sometimes it takes a little patience getting that up. And you also will need a decent enough internet connection to be able to access the cloud machine. So that's something to be mindful. And the biggest con, if you don't have the internet, you do not have a computer that you can access. Now we get to it's the demo, correct?
Yep.
Yep. We get to show you a live demo. And I'm going to have Tim here show us a few different ways we can access a cloud machine here.
Okay, so probably the most common that you've seen is remote desktop application. If you use the red icon remote desktop application, it's a little bit nicer when it comes to these machines. As you can see, I have multiple different licenses and environments on my machine. So I could jump into my cloud PC, my business PC, or these up here are my Windows Virtual Desktop or Azure Virtual Desktop as they renamed it. Workspaces as well. So in one platform, I can see these and log into them. Additionally, you can come over here and you can subscribe to other services. So if you're leveraging, if you're say a contractor and you have multiple VMs with different clients, you could actually bring your subscriptions in for all those different clients and see all the different machines across the board in this environment. So this is probably the more common way to see your virtual desktops, regardless of them being cloud-based PCs or your Azure Virtual Desktop. They just pop up right into here. The next place you can jump into is there's a new, it just got released with Ignite. There's a new application for Windows 10 machines. As you can see up here, it's in preview, but I haven't had any issues with this. It basically comes off your start menu, starts up this application, if you will, instead of a remote desktop session. And then you can connect right into any PCs that you see. I don't see my Azure world. I'm just seeing my Windows 365 world. And my connection is a little bit slow, but when this pops up, it will actually recognize my Windows Hello for Business that we have set up in the environment. So I can enter my PIN code or my facial recognition to sign into that virtual machine instead of typing out my big, long, nasty password and logging into that machine. The other fun part is if you have multiple monitors, I know it just went black because we're waiting for this machine to boot up. It would actually take over all 3 monitors, 4 monitors, as it were a PC tied into those monitors, and screen share that out so that you could have 3 monitors working on this one virtual desktop environment. This works very slick. I have had on and off experience going through the remote desktop application. This one works really well for multi-monitor use for that computer. So it really makes the experience feel like you're on just a Windows 10 machine with multiple monitors and you're not actually working in the cloud or anything like that. close this down. And then lastly, you have your native going to windows365.microsoft.com. Just going to this HTML5 browser and browsing it, you can see my cloud PCs are up here as well. I can open in the browser, or I could give the option to open in the remote desktop app. If you don't have the appropriate application, you just pop to this download arrow and they have all the downloads available for your different operating systems. For IT management on the business side of things, not necessarily the enterprise, depending on what role you have, you'll be able to see different buttons over here. So your organization's cloud PCs. From here, if you're a cloud 365, Windows 365 admin, you can actually reset passwords for folks, see who is licensed and unlicensed. And then if you're a global administrator, you can actually update your organizational settings. And this is, again, just for the business, Windows 365 business side of things. This is where you can go in and dictate if you're a standard user or local administrator on those Windows 365 machines, and then what operating system you're going to leverage and use. This is not across the board either or. You don't get that option with the business side of things. You can in the enterprise side of things, but you could at least dictate everybody's on Windows 10 machine or Windows 11, and are they all local administrators or standard users? Okay. And we'll talk about Jared's favorite piece. So he'll share out his screen.
I'm going to steal the screen share here and connect you to my iPad. And I have remote desktop app installed from the Apple App Store, and I've already signed in with my credentials here to be able to access my cloud PC. And the reason I love this so much, this is a MacBook, iPad Pro. I have the keyboard and a trackpad, so I already have a desktop type experience on my iPad, is now I have what feels like an actual laptop. And this has come in so handy for me personally. If I'm on vacation or if I'm going out of town, I don't want to pack my work laptop when I'm going on vacation, but sometimes things happen where you need to be able to phone home. And what I love is now I have my machine to go just built into my tablet that I'm traveling with, and I can move the mouse, I can use my keyboard just like I'm accessing just like I'm working on an actual laptop. The other nice feature with this, specifically the iPad Pro, I have a USB-C dock that I use for my computer at home. I can plug that same dock into the iPad. My keyboard and my mouse that are at my desk, as well as my monitor, will now give me that full desktop type experience, and I'm just plugging my iPad in with one cable. So that is what it looks like. I see Jason had asked a question about the sluggishness with Office apps. For me, it feels just like a normal computer. I think we'd want to sidebar and do some troubleshooting and see what machines you're running, what else is running in the background, processor and all that type of thing. But for whether it's a remote desktop, the Windows app, and the HTML5 browser, for me, it feels just like a normal computer at that point. All right, I'm going to stop the screen share. I'll give that back to you, Tim, here. I can get back to Teams.
Okay, that didn't share.
There we go. Wow.
All right. As far as Windows 365 machine management, this is all leveraged on the enterprise side of things in the Endpoint Manager Admin Center. So you come into devices here, and you'll see this provisioning Windows 365 arena. This gives you an overview of your machines. You can do some reporting on a remote connection, your resource performance. You can see how the machines are performing, if you need to up the RAM or the GPU or any of those fun things. You'll see all your listed cloud resources listed out, who's got them assigned, which ones are provisioned. This is also where you create provisioning policies. So what image do you use, what that looks like, what groups are assigned to that image, where it came from. This is how the policies get onto those Windows machines. So you'll leverage the full Endpoint Manager Admin Center experience. You could have a group dedicated to the licensing. So you could have a license-based group. And then you could use that same license-based group within Azure to send your provisioning profile down to that machine. So when somebody gets assigned a license, it's also going to go grab this profile off for that machine and build that machine in the cloud so that when they're ready to sign in, it's built and ready to go. This is where you upload and manage your custom images. So if you wanted custom software, versioning, or operating systems, this is where you would build those and upload them into this environment. And then you would attach them in a provisioning profile. What image do you want to use to put that onto the machines? Under the Azure Network Connection, this is where you can build out a VNet, either joining that to your on-prem environment, or you're going to leverage the Microsoft and Azure AD join your enterprise machines leveraging Microsoft's network. Either way is fine. You just need to build out your networks and get them created. Again, it's fairly recent that we were able to do Azure AD join. When it first came out, you were only able to hybrid Azure AD join, and that's only to an on-prem full Azure Active Directory domain services, not the AADDDS service that is a lightweight Azure Active Directory that is in Azure. So if you're going to build an actual Active Directory, you'd have to build a server, load up Azure Active Directory domain server, all the fun things in the cloud to make that work. Now we don't have to do that. We can just leverage the Azure AD join natively with these enterprise machines, and we're off and running. User settings are pretty basic at this point. The two things you're able to do is enable local admin, and it is group assigned, so we're able to dictate who becomes a local admin on the machine, as opposed to making it globally like that you just saw with the business side of things. And then you can dictate your point-in-time restore services and how often you want to have those restore points backed up to be able to load down to the machines. Additionally, over here on the left, if you come into reports, and then you jump into endpoint analytics, which is right here. This is where some of the remote connection comes in for your machines, where you can see your trends, your model performance, and your device performance for the different VMs that you have inside of your environment. Because it is fully Intune managed, you can leverage all the tools within inside of Endpoint Manager. So app distribution, compliance policies, configuration, scripting, Windows update rings, that all gets pushed down to your enterprise PCs or your business PCs now through whatever configuration you have. You can actually also come into your environment and look for a specific VM. So if I came in here and looked for my computer, and I want to look at this one, this is my Windows 365 machine. This looks and feels like any other machine that you manage with Intune Endpoint Manager. Difference is you see device model is your license SKU that you give into your user. There's a performance section for these machines. So this is the specific performance for this computer, as well as you're able to look at your restore points from here. And if I wanted to restore this machine as an admin back to a different date and time, I now just come back here and click and restore to this version, and that VM restores to that point. But again, we're leveraging all the fun components and capabilities of device compliance or device configurations that we're going to push down to this machine and update, and what settings or what group policy, even though it's a configuration you want to push to the machine. You're also able to push and install applications, or however you want to slice and dice the different things that you're going to push to the machine, whether that's PowerShell scripts or bat files or other things to make that machine work. We're able to leverage this environment to get it onto the machine and keep it updated. Now, the nice thing Jared talked about is in the pros and cons, because this machine provisions on licensing, it will build the machine and it will Intune join it, and it will immediately begin to assign policy and configuration to that machine, so that when the user most likely signs in an hour later or the next day, it is already up to date 100% with Endpoint Manager Admin Center, because Intune is pushing those policies continually to that machine. So this provides great flexibility and management capabilities to extend how you manage those machines in the cloud, as opposed to the business side of things, which can be a little hampered and limited. Going the enterprise model opens up your doors. Again, you do have to be Intune managed, have an Intune license for the user to leverage that. But if you already have that SKU within your licensing, it's actually the same price or a little bit cheaper to go to the enterprise than it is to go business anyways. So highly recommend going down this road and working on this environment to manage your Windows 365 machines. Okay. We're gonna have Jared talk about different business use cases that we've seen so far with Windows 365 machines and how we've seen benefits, or we've helped individuals leverage this set of tools to be a benefit to their business in this modern work from home / environment.
All right. I can tell you a lot of these pain points have been real life experiences I've had working on a help desk where it would have been nice to have these features as they came up. So first thing, I know many companies I've been a contractor for, the company is not able to, for whatever reason, issue me a company-owned device, a laptop or whatever, to be able to help that company as a contractor. Windows 365 has a really good story to tell in that scenario where I now can give that contractor a cloud PC, a Windows 365 machine, and then they can simply just use their existing equipment to be able to access those resources in our environment. As Tim had mentioned, we could put that machine in the group. The machine is spun up, it's compliant, it's already talking to all of our company policies. And the nice thing from the contractor perspective is they may have multiple companies they're working for or helping, and now they have different instances through Windows 365 to be able to access different companies' resources, and they're not competing with any type of policy or anything like that that another company may require, because it's all contained within that cloud PC. Another scenario is limited bandwidth. I used to work for a company where half of the company was on the other side of the world, and some of our resources were on-prem and it required a VPN connection to work. But due to bandwidth constraints, the VPN was extremely unreliable, where a remote desktop connection would be just fine. Another great business use case would be I would be able to remote desktop to my cloud PC, my Windows 365 machine, and then utilize that 3 GB connection inside of Microsoft Data Center to be able to access any of those resources internally that I need to get to on-prem. So you have a much more reliable connection, even if your personal connection is not that reliable to the internet. Mac users, this is a huge pain point for me. I use Mac about 95% of my day, but there are times where I need Windows to be able to run, whether it be a specific application or some type of business process that is not capable of running on my Mac. And prior to a cloud PC, you need to have some sort of virtual machine software like Parallels. You need to purchase a license. You need to purchase a Windows license. And then because you turn Windows on maybe once or twice in the month, you've got all these pending updates waiting to happen. And then when you want to just turn that computer off, that virtual machine off, now you got to wait for those updates to install. Now you have a really nice solution to be able to just access your cloud PC, which is already turned on, which is already up to date because of all the policies, and you know that it's compliant. And a side note, for those of you on the M1 chip with a Mac, not all programs can run on that VM. And so now you have a cloud PC that could run those programs because it's running 64-bit. Software images. So the one thing that I really love about this is you may have some software that may not be able to be deployable. It might not have a silent install. It may need user interaction. You can build custom images and upload them to your tenant and then scope those images to different groups. So if you have a department that's a call center, another department that is marketing, you can have a custom image for each of those departments, scope those out to groups. And the beautiful thing about this is it will support dynamic groups. So you can take the load off of your workload of having to get all this stuff provisioned simply by putting the correct job title or department or whatever it is you scope your dynamic groups off of to automatically have that machine provisioned for that end user. And that machine will be available to them in roughly half hour to an hour. Supply chain issues. For those of us that were in IT at the beginning of 2020, I think all of us can relate to this. Really awesome business case is the machine's not available. There's a back order. Somebody needs a specialized device to be able to do their job. But again, we have to wait 2 months for that hardware to become available. You have the ability to get a machine ready to go for somebody, whether it be with a loaner laptop that you might have available or somebody's personal machine. I know that this was a scenario that was very common. We had to get an entire workforce to work from home suddenly, unexpectedly, and nobody could get a computer for the life of them. You would be able to click a few buttons, have a machine ready to go, and that person could use their personal laptop to be able to still do their job at home, and we wouldn't have to worry about the security of the environment. Eliminating that VPN. So going back to the scenario I was talking about with very limited bandwidth, with a cloud PC, you do not need to have to connect a VPN to be able to access your internal resources. You're already internal when you access that cloud PC. No physical hardware you have to rely on other than your internet connection. And thin client scenario. This is a real life scenario that we helped a company with. They had a retail store, multiple point of sale machines all over the store. And these end users were doing sales, so they would need to keep their notes and all their software to follow them. The beautiful thing with this is all that thin client needs is remote desktop. Multiple users can have their logins saved to remote desktop, and they can connect to their cloud PC. So they could start at the beginning, at the front of the store, helping a customer, and they could close the sale at the back of the store, logging into a different point of sale computer, but it's the same cloud PC because they're signing in with their credentials.
Yeah, we're still able to leverage the local printing for that sales ticket through that thin client. Another fun point of that is not only were we able to deploy a laptop, Windows 365 laptop for each employee, we're also able to, you could actually, some thin clients are Intune manageable. So now you could kiosk that Intune thin client, lock it down to just that one application, and then from there they can access their quote personal laptop in the cloud to do their point of sale or their business or their work without having to open up risk to the environment for other random people logging in. So this was a fun use case that we were able to help an organization with and actually improve their business process and keep it clean and simple for them. Okay, let's go to the chat and see what questions we got.
John wants to know about Windows 365 supporting vGPU enablement, such as CAD applications.
Yeah, so you're limited to the SKUs that Microsoft provides, John. It may or may not be enough RAM or CPU to handle CAD. CAD's kind of one of those interesting animals. It's a very large file to install, so that would be one where we wouldn't deploy that application through Intune anyways because it's so big. We'd have to create a custom image. That might be a unique use case where you could do a mix and match, right? Have that in your Azure Virtual Desktops world for those type of machines. And then for your everyday users that need more simplistic machines, Windows 365 would probably be a better solution in that use case. So it just, again, depends on the demand and the use for that machine. AutoCAD, depending on what you're doing, engineering, designing robotic arms or very complicated CAD things or very resource heavy, probably not a Windows 365 solution for you, but you could have a very niche Azure Virtual Desktop world for those types of machines, and then you could let it leverage Windows 365 computers in other use cases. So what other questions we got?
That was it. And we can revisit the one that Jason said earlier that his users are having keyboard and mouse response being sluggish and the Office applications are also slow. We could talk about how you can spin up to a higher SKU as well. Windows 365 does give you the ability, you could start at a very base level SKU where it's a limited processor, low RAM, low hard drive size, but you do realize you end up needing a more beefier machine. There is a built-in option in the portal where you can scale it up to the next SKU and go as high as you want to add more CPUs, bigger hard drive space without having to re-provision that machine. One caveat to that, just to be aware of, you can ramp up, you can't ramp back down. So if you do need to go back down, you'd have to essentially provision a brand new cloud PC.
Yeah, and another fun thing to note there is if their original machine license was distributed via a group, you'd have to remove them from the group, manually direct assign that license, and then you can migrate them up on the machine to get them a better use case. I have also seen some sluggish mouse and keyboard response times. Typically, that is due to an older remote desktop client. I would tell you to go to the Microsoft Store and download the app. I've had fantastic success with the app. It's more reliable, it's faster, it's quicker, and a better sign-in experience. So with that release that they just announced in Ignite just a few weeks ago, give that app a shot to see if that increases the responsive time for your keyboards and mice having sluggishness on it. I have seen that though, and typically it's because I didn't update my remote desktop client or whatnot. You're going to see that sluggishness more if you go through an HTML5 browser than you would through a client like remote desktop or the new Windows app. So that would be my suggestion there.
Danny wants to know if there is any support for Linux.
Windows 365 machines. I haven't played with the option of creating a custom image that's Linux and then pushing it down on the Windows 365 machine. I know in the Azure Virtual Desktop world, yes, that's an option. I know in Intune and Endpoint Manager, Linux is now manageable as an Intune managed machine. So we can actually manage those Intune devices with Linux and get into that world. And actually last week, Google operating system, so your what are they called?
Chromebook,
Google Chromebooks or your Oculus or whatever that may be, those are now going to be more manageable with Endpoint Manager as well. But natively out of the box with your Linux as an OS system, I haven't played with that or tried that yet, but it's an interesting, you're going to make me want to go play is what you're doing there with that question. So.
And looks like we have another question from John talking about a lot of organizations require web content filtering. Do you typically see organizations leveraging third-party solutions such as Cisco Umbrella, or is Defender for Endpoint typically capable of handling this need?
Yeah, so Defender for Endpoint can do web content filtering. It's a matter of building out that backend structure, enabling web content filtering, and then getting it on there. Had good success going down that route, and where you have the Intune, okay, we're going into the Microsoft shop world. If you're doing a Windows 365 machine that is managed by Endpoint Manager, and Endpoint Manager is connected to Defender for Endpoint through connectors as well, it's a great way to get that onto those machines and managing those web content filtering as well, allowing or not allowing. Additionally, through Endpoint Manager use case today, you can actually leverage Internet Explorer mode and push that down through your Endpoint Manager. So if you have legacy applications that require Internet Explorer 5, for example, we can now make that accessible through Edge and some connectors and whatnot, and push that down to your Windows 365 machine, and you're off and running with those custom old applications in your modern browser on a modern machine in the cloud. So there's some fun use cases there as well.
And that is it so far on questions.
Any other questions? We still got a little bit of time. One of the things we did is we had interns start up with us. They were way remote, didn't have hardware available, and we did leverage a Windows 365 machine because they had a personal machine to get up and running in our environment. The nice thing about Windows 365 machines is they do reside in the cloud. They're behind a Microsoft protected environment. So data typically can't leave the machine. You think about it, you're not going to be able to stick a thumb drive into your laptop and extract the data off your Windows 365 machine because it's in the cloud. So we're not getting any data off that way. So you're able to protect and secure your environment more by pushing individuals to a cloud-based machine than you would trying to lock down a physical device, which we can do with Endpoint Manager, but it does give you some flexibility and options as far as that's concerned. So I've seen that, and it's been a good use case as well.
Oh, I like this question from Jason. Do you know if there's going to be any changes to the licensing in the future, such as bundling Windows 365 with business premium licenses? That would be great. I agree. Wouldn't it be nice?
We have no control over Microsoft nor their licensing or their whim to change their licensing. Yeah, I would hope it becomes a little bit more flexible. If you do have existing infrastructure and licenses, again, we have found the enterprise licensing for Windows 365 to be cheaper than the business. We have seen Microsoft bundle their VoIP together into bundles as opposed to having separate packages of I need phone system and I need a domestic calling plan. They're now bundling those together. So I would predict there's a day coming, but until there's a demand, I don't know that they'll bundle it together in one SKU or as an add-on. They'll probably keep it separate at this point. But again, if you're in Azure, we can leverage licensing groups and we can eliminate that headache for you by saying, all right, here's a license group and I'm going to assign you Microsoft 365 Business Premium, and I'm going to give you your VM licensing together in one group. And then as you add users to the group, you're controlling the SKUs they get, and it just builds those machines and provisions them, and they're off and running as far as that goes. So while they could bundle it, we can mimic that behavior with group-based licensing, basically. And so it's not really been a concern or anything for us in that aspect.
That's it on questions so far.
Nothing? Quiet? Anybody else?
I went ahead and put the link to the survey there in the chat as well. So any feedback would be great. But yeah, we've got a few more minutes left. So any other questions at this time we can help out with?
It's the bad thing about presenting and being the only ones talking. I tend to talk faster and I spew out more content than if we were in a discussion, in a group discussion. So throw your questions in the chat, email us, be happy to do a discovery with you, have conversation deeper around this, look into your specific business use cases to see how we can make Windows 365 work for you, or frankly say it's not a good use case for your business and maybe you need to look at X, Y, Z. We're all about helping you find appropriate solutions, not saying, oh, you got to go down this road and Windows is the way to go. I don't get any kickbacks. It's all about helping you make a good business use case for you and improving your business processes. So I'd welcome anybody throwing it in the chat or putting it into the survey, say, hey, give us a call. Let's have a 30-minute discussion and dig a little bit deeper and talk specifics about my business and how Windows 365 may or may not be a good fit for you. Happy to do that for you.
We find it useful for temps and interns. Instead of giving them laptops, we give them Windows 365. At least we're experimenting with that now. Good.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. We've had lots of great success with temps getting a Windows 365 machine. It's less overhead. It's less, where's my laptop? If it doesn't work out, you de-license them. You're going to leverage the endpoint, your Microsoft business tools. So their content's backed up to OneDrive and in the SharePoint, it's already in the cloud. You deactivate their license or delete them and their content goes to their manager for 30 days and then deletes. I mean, there's some good benefits to that, especially for contractors and temps, getting them access to your environment. We've also seen, as a contractor, conditional access policies that block us from accessing their environment, their Azure environment, because I'm not on a quote compliant device, because my laptop is not managed by their organization. And this would eliminate that headache that we go through when that happens, or getting an exclusion to that conditional access policy. That keeps the security tight, that keeps that device compliant, that allows me to work in their environment in a secure, safe way and be productive, as opposed to, hey, I'm locked here, I'm handcuffed, I'm locked out, you made a change, now I can't get in and work. And now we're wasting time trying to figure out how come I can't get to and help you do X, Y, Z, right? So yeah, we've seen that be a great benefit as well. Anybody else? Good. If you want to stick around, throw some more questions in the chat. We'll hang out for the next 5 minutes. If you want to pin us down, happy to do that as well.
We got another one here, Tim. Can you talk about the experience with Teams on the Windows 365 desktop?
Okay, yeah. So Microsoft, because of how they do Teams, they put a lot of effort into making sure Teams works in that environment, both in the Azure Virtual Desktop world as well as in the Windows 365 world. So it's not a traditional like Citrix environment where everything's trying to process and pull through. They actually separate the bandwidth of how Teams works, and you actually leverage your local internet pipeline for some of that Teams meeting and usage, and then the other content is piped through another pipe back into the Microsoft world. You may lose some capabilities with filtering or whatnot, putting background images on, but it hasn't been a big enough issue that that we've really seen any issues with that. You still have the desktop application. You still have those options as leveraging your existing hardware on your machines. Jared can join on his Windows 365 machine. I've joined on Windows 365 means into Teams meetings and had good success with that as well. So if you're having issues with it, maybe we need to dig into why or what specific use cases, but for the most part, I haven't had really any issues with Teams in that environment.
Good call out. Jason is letting everybody know that webcams do not work. You'd have to leverage your personal device.
Yep.